Hi guys, how you doing? Hope you're all well. So in this video I'm going to cover a recent trip that I had way down south to an aerospace company, whereby my company has installed 2 test rigs and also a hydraulic power unit. These test rigs are used to test valve stations that go onto aeroplanes, usually the very large like jumbo jet aeroplanes. So it's quite an important test rig in a sense that, you know, the valve's made and then they have to test the valve to make sure that it complies with all these different pressures and stuff like that. If the test rig doesn't work properly, then they can't test the valves properly. So it's, you know, kind of a serious deal when you're flying on planes that have its valves have been tested by me. So yeah, hold your breath a little bit when you get on the plane next time. But yeah, so my job was to go down to this site, and basically my company installed the test rigs, and they also installed a hydraulic power unit downstairs, which which uses some motors, which turns some pumps, which pumps the oil up to the test rigs and at different pressures. And so my job was, the software on that is done in these PCs that were installed on the back of these cabinets. And so the reason why I went down was the IT staff at this aerospace company wouldn't allow the old machines on the network anymore. So because they were running Windows 7, it was a security risk. And so what it did is they said, look, you know, you have to upgrade it to Windows 10, or else you're not going to be able to run these test rigs. So they shut the test rigs down, and then they called us to come in and basically buy new PCs, and then take the software, upgrade it onto Windows 10, and then reinstall the PCs and the software onto the test rig. So when I got there, I was shocked to hear that one of the test rigs hadn't been run for 4 years and the other one hadn't run for a year. And my job was to install the PCs and then also get the test rigs running. And you know, if something hasn't run for years, you know, there's a very high unlikelihood that's not going to run, especially if you only got a week to do it. So yeah, it was very fun. We showed up, had a look at the PLC rack. There was a whole bunch of errors on the rack, as you'd expect there to be. It was an old S7 PLC. And so what we did was, the rig that had been running recently had all of the errors, but the other rig that hadn't run for 4 years had none of the errors. What we did is we just took all of the cards out of the old rig and put them put them out of the rig that hadn't run for 4 years and put them back into the rig that had just been running a year ago. And then voila, we had no errors. So we was able to, the PLC was all happy. So then it just involved installing the software, and it was a bit of a headache because you had to map some network drives. And you know, I saw something recently on Reddit which asked, does a controls engineer need to know anything about IT? And you know, I must say, you definitely do. Like, this whole week was just pure IT for me. You know, making sure that database files were there so that the software could access the database files, which had all of the IO list, which had the PLC IP address. I also had to make sure that the software could load defaults. So for example, like configurations around the tank temperature, you know, at what temperature do you want the tank, at what oil temperature do you want the motors to turn off, and at what oil temperature low wise do you want the motors to turn off as well, and not be allowed to start. So if the oil is less than 10 degrees Celsius, you don't want to start the motors, and if the oil is more than 60 degrees Celsius, you don't want to start the motors, and you want to probably turn off the motors because you got a problem. So yeah, those kind of configurations, I had to make sure that was all loaded. Then when that was the case, then I had to fix a bunch of problems on the rig itself. So we had to fix a broken valve on the hydraulic power unit. We also had to fix this dodgy e-stop, which you could push in but you couldn't pull out, and even when you pushed it in, you wasn't actually sure that it actually gone in, or you wasn't sure that it had gone out. It was a dodgy e-stop. And the reason for that, I should probably interject here, is that these rigs and just aerospace in general, they use a really light fuel. So if you've heard of kerosene, the oil that they use in aerospace industry is obviously has to be very light. It can't be heavy, because obviously the plane needs to fly, the helicopter needs to fly. So here they use an oil called Skydrol, which is like a trademark for, it's a fire resistant oil, so it's unlikely to catch fire, and it's also very light. The problem with it is if you get it on your hands, it's gonna burn. If you get it on your if you get it on your down below when you go toilet, it's gonna burn. So the whole week I was wearing gloves and my hands were sweating, going dry, all sorts, but I kept my gloves on. I had to wash my hands a bunch. Thankfully I didn't feel any burn or tingly feelings anywhere, so I was all good in that sense. But it literally, the oil will melt your shoes. Not exactly a fully safe job, but thankfully that week down there we didn't have any issues. Once I upgraded the PCs, then we ran the rig, and we wasn't able to achieve high pressure, so they wanted to get up on the rig 330 bar, and previously they'd gotten 280 bar of pressure, but this time I was only able to get up to 9 bar. So I'm not too solid with the hydraulics. I still need to learn a bit more, but I do have an idea of what was happening, and so probably going to end up going down there again, and then should hopefully be able to fix that rig and get it running properly. So yeah, it was exciting. You know, it's nice to see how like all the various different modules at university are kind of starting to click together in my head. And then also the experience. I've been working now for 5 months, and you know, the fact that I went down there and I was the most experienced person on the site, in the sense that like it was all up to me. There was no one for me to refer back to or ask for any help. Literally, if I didn't get it working, and if I didn't figure it out, no one would have figured it out, and that thing would still be broken now. So at least they can run some very basic tests. Overall, very good week. Got to eat some decent food as well, which is always nice. And yeah, I don't know when I'm next going on site. This was my most recent site visit. I've been on site 3 times now, and yeah, next time I go on site I'll do a video like this and hopefully update you guys. So thanks for watching, take care.